You're in a room filled with people who believe they're the ones steering the ship, and none of them see you as the one changing its course. Not because you're invisible, not because you lurk in the dark, but because you've mastered the oldest move in the playbook. Power doesn't always roar when it enters. Sometimes it seeps through the unnoticed cracks of routine, through the silence between choices, through those careless pauses when everyone else is too busy posturing to realize who's shifting the foundation beneath them. This isn't about violent takeovers, fiery speeches, or cinematic betrayals. It's about acquisitions so quiet, so seamless, that by the time anyone wakes up to what has happened, you're not painted as the intruder. You're accepted as the solution. And Machiavelli didn't just hint at this idea. He mapped it, not in the loud proclamations that people love to quote, but in the margins, in the unfinished spaces of his warnings, in the blanks he left for sharp minds to complete. Because if you can read between the lines, he knew you'd be bold enough to execute without needing approval. So let me ask you, when was the last time you witnessed someone rise without spectacle? Not the kind who storms the spotlight demanding applause, but the one who one day is simply at the head of the table and no one can trace back the moment it began. That's not coincidence. That's not luck. That's silent acquisition. And it isn't reserved for monarchs, tycoons, or revolutionaries. It is within reach of anyone who understands this truth. Power isn't seized, it is absorbed, like water seeping into soil. Gradual, quiet, inevitable. You don't need a crown to move as if the room already belongs to you. You need presence, not the noisy, boastful kind, the gravitational kind. The kind that doesn't ask for space, but bends the room around itself by merely existing. Think of it this way. Most people treat power like a crown, visible, heavy, a prize someone must place on your head. Machiavelli saw it differently. He saw it as a current, invisible, constant, shaping everything beneath the surface without ever disturbing the water above. You don't clutch at the current, you learn to swim with it. Better yet, you learn to redirect it. And the brilliance is, no one notices the shift until the river has already carved a new course. That's the craft. That's the law. Silent acquisition isn't about force. It's about frequency, showing up again and again at the pulse of decisions. Not to argue, not to impress, but to become part of the rhythm. The figure always present when problems arise. The one who resolves without demanding credit. The one who remains unshaken by noise, but quietly restores order. That's the person who ends up holding the keys. Not because they seized them, but because everyone else forgot where they were kept. Here's the part people don't want to face. Most are terrified of stepping into that space. Not for lack of ambition, but because they've been taught to wait for permission, the title, the invitation. But Machiavelli never believed in waiting. He believed in positioning. You don't beg to be trusted. You create conditions where trust is the only reasonable option. You don't plead for influence. You engineer dependencies so natural, so embedded, that to remove you would feel like tearing out a supporting wall. And you achieve this without fanfare, without broadcast, without announcing ambition. Because the instant you reveal desire, you make yourself a target. The instant you stay quiet, you become part of the structure. So let's bring this down from the abstract. Not some dusty lesson from centuries ago, but something you can see right now. Picture a workplace. Any industry, doesn't matter. A project is collapsing. Everyone's talking, everyone's blaming. Meetings pile up, voices clash. Then someone, neither boss nor loudest voice, steps in. I'll take care of the client's side. They vanish for 2 days, return with timelines fixed, deliverables adjusted, calm assurance that all is under control. No chest beating, no spotlight chasing, just results. So when the next fire breaks out, who does everyone look toward? Not the one with the title, the one who solved the last crisis. That is silent acquisition. You didn't demand leadership, you didn't campaign for it. You became indispensable by carrying what no one else wanted to touch, and you did it without making yourself the story. This is where most fail. They think acquisition means noise, that they must be seen, applauded, spotlighted. But Machiavelli understood the reverse. The louder you shout, the more resistance you meet. The quieter you move, the more ground you claim. Because silence is not emptiness, it is strategy. It is the space where assumptions take root, where reputations grow without your hand forcing them. When you're not broadcasting your worth, others begin to broadcast it for you, and that is infinitely stronger. A reputation born from other mouths is a shield. A reputation you hammer out yourself is a target. And here's the twist. This isn't manipulation in the cheap sense. It's not deception. It's mastery of human nature. It's placing yourself where you'll be needed before anyone even knows they need you. It's reading the room not for vanity, but for leverage. Where is the tension? Where is the gap? Where is the unspoken tension no one dares to touch? That's your entry point. Not to exploit, but to dissolve. And in dissolving it, you weave yourself into the fabric. You stop being optional. You become the solution. And solutions don't get replaced. They get depended on. Maybe you're thinking, this sounds passive. It's not. It's deeply active, just beneath the surface. It's the discipline of choosing moments with surgical precision. It's knowing when to let silence work harder than words. It's forging alliances not through empty compliments, but through consistent reliability. It's becoming the person whispered about in corridors. Have you asked them yet? Not because you demanded to be consulted, but because you became the obvious choice. That's the magic. That's the rule. You don't seize power with noise. You let it gravitate toward you by being the only fixed point in a storm of spinning plates. And here's the haunting truth. This works everywhere, in boardrooms, in circles of friends, in creative partnerships, in families, even in online spaces. Power doesn't belong to a place. It belongs to a pattern. The one who shows up with calm, clarity, and competence without craving applause is the one who ends up steering, not because they fought for the wheel, but because everyone else unknowingly handed it over. So here's your first move. Stop waiting for permission. Stop watching for green lights. Start finding the silent gaps around you, the unanswered questions, the nagging tensions, the small tasks no one claims. Step in quietly. Do them consistently. Do them without noise. Let your results echo louder than your words ever could. And watch, not with impatience, but with patience, as the room reshapes itself around you. Not because you demanded it, because you became inevitable. And if you think this is just theory, if you think these are only clever turns of phrase, wait. Because what I've given you so far, that's only the surface. The real mechanics, the psychological triggers, the timing, the redirections, the way you make people believe the power was always yours, those are where things turn dangerous. That's where it gets real. And you're not ready for that yet. Not until you've mastered silence. Not until you've trained yourself to move without shaking the ground. So breathe, observe, position. And when the moment comes, and it will, you won't have to declare yourself. They'll already know. You think you've seen power move? You haven't. What most call power is only theater, noise dressed as authority. The shouting, the posturing, the titles, the stage confidence, none of that is control. That's performance. True power never needs to declare itself. It's already seated at the table before the meeting begins. It's already written the script before anyone arrives. And the one holding it isn't the loudest voice. It's the one everyone looks toward once the noise dies down. That's silent acquisition. Not a takeover, an absorption. A slow, patient infiltration of influence so complete that by the time it's visible, undoing it would mean collapsing everything. Machiavelli didn't etch this in bold. He scattered it in warnings and hypotheticals because he knew if you could spot it, you were sharp enough to wield it. He understood what most strategists miss. People never resist what they don't see as a threat. So don't posture as one. Be relief. Be calm in chaos. Be the hand that steadies the ship without grasping the wheel. That's how you claim control without asking. That's how you make them grateful for your presence, even as you're rewriting the rules beneath their feet. So let's strip away the philosophy. Let's get practical. Not recycled quotes, not abstract theory. A move you can make tomorrow. Picture this. You're in a group. Colleagues, friends, collaborators. A decision stalls. The room fills with debate, no one agreeing, voices colliding, momentum gone. Most rush to add opinions to win the noise. You don't. You wait. You let the chaos crest and dip. Then, when exhaustion takes hold, you don't throw in an answer. You offer a frame. What if we broke this into 3 phases? Or what's the one point we all agree on right now? You're not positioning as the solution. You're positioning as the structure. And structures aren't argued with. They're used. Suddenly you're not leading, you're enabling. And enabling is the most potent form of leadership because no one resents it. They thank you for it. While they feel seen, you're the one quietly drawing the boundaries of what's possible. That's not manipulation, that's architecture. And here's the deeper truth. You don't have to be the smartest in the room. You only need to be the sharpest observer. Watch how decisions actually unfold. Not how they're supposed to, but how they do. Who defers to whom? Who interrupts without penalty? Who always speaks last? That's your map, that's your blueprint. Silent acquisition isn't about crushing the system. It's about reading its hidden wiring and quietly rerouting the current. You don't fight the hierarchy. You outmaneuver it by becoming the piece it cannot function without. The assistant who knows every file's location, who never forgets a deadline, who spots mistakes before they surface. This person doesn't need the title to run the operation. They already do. And the executives, they'll defend them, not because of loyalty, but because their own survival depends on it. Take that person away, and the whole machine seizes. That's not dependence. That's dominance masked as service. This is why Machiavelli never glorified brute force. He knew open grabs at power spark resistance, silent acquisition. It sparks gratitude. You take on what no one else will. The tedious logistics, the awkward confrontations, the uncelebrated grunt work. And suddenly, you're not the overlooked underdog. You're the linchpin, and linchpins don't beg for promotions. They don't lobby for raises. They're offered them because the thought of losing them is unbearable. That's the target, to stitch yourself so tightly into the fabric that pulling you out unravels everything. And you never declare, "I'm indispensable." You let them whisper it in quiet conversations, in urgent emails, in panicked tones when you're absent. That's victory, not applause. Panic in your absence. But here's where most people stumble. They mistake silence for passivity. That's fatal. Silent acquisition is not waiting, it's hunting. It is scanning constantly for points of friction and pouring yourself into them like water filling cracks in stone. You're not idle, you're precise. Every exchange, every duty, every idle moment is a chance to ask, where is the gap? Where is the blind spot? What silent rule, if nudged, shifts everything? That's your arena. That's your leverage, and you don't need consent to move there. You need awareness and the courage to act. Let me make it tangible. Picture yourself on a creative team. Ideas fly, egos clash, deadlines close in. Everyone obsesses over vision, branding, the dazzling launch. You notice no one is syncing feedback, no one is tracking versions, no one ensures the designer has the writer's latest draft, so you step in. Quietly, you build the shared folder, you send the reminders, you hold the chaos together. 3 weeks later, the client asks for revision history. Everyone freezes, except you. You have it, neat, immediate, unshakable. In that instant, you're no longer the intern or the junior. You're the operational spine. And when the next project begins, who runs workflow? Not the loudest voice. The one who kept the train from crashing. That silent acquisition. No campaign, no speech, just inevitability. And here's the secret edge. This scales. It works with 3 people or 300. In a fresh startup or a century-old empire, power doesn't care about scope, it cares about necessity. Become necessary, and titles lose relevance. You don't need the CEO's chair to guide the company. You just need to know which lever to pull when the engine stutters. You don't need to be the founder to mold the culture. You need to embody the behavior others unconsciously copy. Influence isn't measured in noise. It's measured in consistency. It's the daily act of fixing what others dismiss until your way becomes the default. And defaults? No one questions them. They're followed. Now let's talk timing. Because this isn't meant to be endless groundwork, there comes a moment, and you will feel it like a tremor in your gut, when the foundation you've built can finally carry weight. That's when you stop being the fixer and begin as the architect. You don't announce it, you prove it. You take a single decision, small but visible, and you don't treat it like a suggestion. You set it as precedent. Not what do you think we should do, but here's how we'll proceed. Subtle, certain, powerful, immense, because language doesn't just describe reality, it defines it. And when you speak from a place of quiet authority, others absorb it as truth. That isn't arrogance, it's calibration. You've paid the price. Now you take the seat, not with loud claims, but with presence. And Machiavelli he'd approve, not for cruelty's sake, but for efficiency. He knew people follow rhythms more than principles. If you become the rhythm, the pulse that steadies the chaos, persuasion isn't necessary. They feel you, they lean on you, they guard you. That's when power crystallizes. Not in titles or speeches, but in the unspoken recognition that things only run smoother when you're involved. That's the final game. That's the rule. You don't seize power. You make it unthinkable to function without you. And you do it so subtly, so elegantly, that no one notices when they've already placed the keys in your hand, until they try to take them back and find the locks have vanished. But don't mistake this for a rival. The second you feel secure is the second you're exposed. Silent acquisition isn't an end, it's a discipline. It demands constant tuning, constant awareness, constant restraint. The moment you start believing your own legend, you become the noise, and noise fades. Stay fluid, stay quiet, stay indispensable, and above all, stay underestimated. That S where real power breathes, in the gap between what they perceive and what you were truly shaping. And if you think you've reached the depths, you haven't, not yet, because what follows dismantles the illusion of control itself. The defiance when you learn to weaponize absence, to make them ache for you before you've even left, to turn silence into gravity. But that lesson comes later. That's for when you've mastered being everywhere without ever demanding notice. So keep watching, keep adjusting, keep solving what no one else can see, and when the ground shifts under every foot, you won't falter. You'll be the one steadying it all, silently, seamlessly, irreplaceably, undefined. They'll never anticipate it, not because you've hidden, but because you've made yourself seem so ordinary that your absence cracks the earth. That's the final layer. That's the apex of invisible power. You don't triumph by being loudest. You triumph by becoming the air, taken for granted, unnoticed until gone, and then missed with desperation. Machiavelli knew this. The power that lasts isn't the one that roars. It's the one that hums beneath the surface, quiet, constant, unremarkable, until its removal dismantles the whole. That's not something you declare, it's something you construct, brick by hidden brick, patiently, ruthlessly. Strip away the niceties. This isn't about waiting politely or asking for turns. This is about engineered invisibility, about letting them cling to the illusion of control while you guide the unseen levers. You don't need the head chair. You need to be the balance that keeps it upright. And the instant you grasp that, the instant you master vanishing without absence, receding without surrender, you step beyond reach. Because how can you fight what won't appear in the arena? How can you replace what never demanded to be irreplaceable? You can't. You won't. That's the trap. Here's the blueprint. You begin small. You take ownership of a rhythm, a duty, a system that no one else wants. Not because it's beneath you, because it's invisible. The check-ins, the reminders, the files, the subtle glue that holds the mechanism together but earns no spotlight. You own it. Not bitterly, not dramatically, but with surgical consistency. You perform it so flawlessly, so predictably, it becomes indistinguishable from your presence. And then, this part matters, you separate your name from it. You stop saying, "I fixed it." You say it's handled. You detach from the credit cycle. Why? Because when the task no longer belongs to you, it becomes background, automatic. And when something becomes automatic and you're the one who made it so, you've embedded yourself into the system's DNA. DNA isn't questioned, it's assumed, and then you withdraw, not all at once, not theatrically, but by degrees. You let a deadline drift by a few hours. You don't rush to patch the misstep. You pause long enough for silence to grow sharp, long enough for an unanswered message to burn, long enough for them to notice. That's the turning point, not when you're fixing, but when you're absent. Because in that gap, they feel the weight of what you've shielded. They realize how much of the grind you absorbed, and they don't resent your absence. They scramble, they worry, they reach out, they apologize, they plead for your return, not because you demanded it, but because you let them experience the weight of your absence. That isn't manipulation, that's calibration. You're not punishing them, you're educating them, showing them what life feels like when the silent engine no longer hums. This is the point where most retreat. They fear stepping back. They assume it makes them appear unreliable. But Machiavelli would laugh at such fear. He understood that true power isn't proven in presence, it's revealed in absence. Anyone can contribute when they're visible. The true test is this: can you make people feel disoriented when you're not there? That's the threshold. Cross it, and you cease being just an employee, a colleague, a companion. You become infrastructure, and infrastructure doesn't negotiate, it doesn't campaign, it doesn't ask. It simply exists, and everything else adjusts around it. Let me put this in something tangible. Imagine you're the one who always coordinates the team retreats, not because you adore logistics, but because no one else will. You manage the invitations, the venues, the meals, the agendas. You do it quietly without applause. Then one month you're swamped. You hand it off. They stumble. Dates overlap, meals are missed, the schedule falls apart. The retreat limps to the finish, and everyone is both grateful and exhausted. And when you say, "I'll take care of the next one," relief floods the room. No one has to ask, no one even thinks twice. They assume it's yours because you've shown them what happens without you. That's the real aim, not to be praised, to be presumed. Now magnify that, scale it to budgets, to client relationships, to crisis response, to creative leadership, to culture, to trust. The principle never changes. You embed, you enable, then you withdraw. Just enough. You let the cracks show, then you return, not as a hero, but as a certainty. The phrase you want to hear isn't "thank you" or "great work." It's "oh good, you're handling it." That's not gratitude. That's surrender. That's silent acquisition at its core. They're not granting you power. They're admitting you've already taken it. And the beauty is, you never need to say a word. You don't have to broadcast your efforts. You don't need a record of credit. You don't keep score because the system itself keeps it for you. The smoother things run with you, the louder the silence roars when you step away. And the louder it roars, the harder they cling. Not out of devotion, but out of necessity. And necessity creates the strongest loyalty of all. But here's where most people ruin it. They get greedy. They try to cash in. They flex the moment they feel leverage. And that's when they become visible again. That's when they become vulnerable. Silent acquisition only works if you remain frictionless. The instant you weaponize your indispensability, the illusion shatters. You become the obstacle instead of the solution. So you resist that temptation. You stay composed. You stay quiet. You stay generous even while holding all the leverage. Because generosity from a position of strength isn't weakness. It's command. It's the type of control that doesn't require enforcement. It simply exists. Machiavelli didn't spell this out in neat chapters. He whispered it in spaces, in glances, in silences where only sharp eyes could connect the meaning. Because if you can see it, you're capable of using it. He understood power isn't brute force. It's resonance. It's showing up precisely where you matter most, solving what others ignore, and then stepping back just far enough for the void to be felt. Not as punishment, but as a reminder. A recalibration, a quiet lesson that the world spins smoother when you're its axis. And if you think this is the conclusion, you're mistaken. It isn't an ending, it's a rhythm, a current, the quiet machinery running beneath everything you'll ever build. Because power isn't seized, it's absorbed, it's woven, it becomes the fabric itself.